I will tell you a bit about cultivation of hemp in Denmark, and I will look into both the status at this time, but also on the potentials. And I will start with a short introduction about the Danish partnership in BOP. I think most of you perhaps already know, but just shortly, we are four different organizations in the Danish part of the project, Agrovi, which is a Danish agricultural consultancy company. Then there's Guldborgsund Municipality, which is a local government area in southeastern Denmark. We have SELF, which is a vocational education and training institution, and then Business Lolland Falster, who is a regional business development organization. And a little bit more about Agrovi, where I work. My name is Henrik Kruse Rasmussen. I'm a project consultant in Agrovi. I have a master in forestry actually for many years ago, but have been working in the farm consulting business area for about 20 years now, and I have been working with different kind of projects almost all the time. But a little bit more about Agrovi. We have 5 offices in Denmark, and you can see the locations on the map. Besides offering consultancy, Agrovi also work on several projects, primarily within the field of green transition of farming, including the BOP project. And in this project, Agrovi focuses on the potential for growing industrial hemp for building materials and the wider environmental, climate, and biodiversity benefits it might bring. So the status of hemp cultivation is in Denmark is that it's a niche crop with only a few hundred hectares cultivated nationwide each year. As you can see in the figure, the graph on the right, we had a peak year in 2022, but even though it was a record year, we only had less than 800 hectares nationwide. And also, actually, hemp in Denmark is mainly grown for seed production, which is used for food, feed, and cosmetics. And only a smaller share of the crop is cultivated for its fibers and use in building materials. About the legislation, it's like you have to apply for permission to grow hemp in Denmark, and you actually need to be approved by the police for being able to or being allowed to cultivate hemp. And this is of course yes, an extra administrative burden, so it's kind of a barrier for cultivation of hemp in Denmark, but it's not a big work, but it's anyway, it is taking some time, and even with other crops, there's administrative tasks enough, so I think this is actually a barrier. We're only allowed to use low THC varieties, and actually we are not even allowed to use the varieties that are legal in the rest of Europe, because we have a max of 0.2% of THC in the varieties that are legally in Denmark. So there is some legal barriers. The status of the value chain in Denmark is that it's on a very early stage. There are initiatives on the way, but they are primarily based on imported hemp fractions that have been processed into sheaves and fibers outside the country. In the BOP project, we work to strengthen the hemp value chain by, among other things, engaging with industry organizations in both construction and agricultural areas, as well as we have dialogue with partners both in Denmark and abroad. And one of the options that we are exploring is whether exporting unprocessed Danish hemp could make cultivation economically viable for the farmers. And the thought behind that is that if enough hemp is grown, it may help lay the foundation for the next steps in the value chain because we have the chicken and the chicken and egg problem because at least we think that it's difficult to get the farmers to grow hemp when there's no local companies working with the hemp, processing the hemp, but also it's difficult to get anyone to invest in these processing plants if there's no local cultivation of hemp. So it's a problem that's a little difficult to solve, we think, but one way could be perhaps to start with cultivating hemp and then exporting the unprocessed hemp. Yes, and if we should take a look at the economy, I have made some calculations which are quite some more positive than Janus. Perhaps they are not realistic, but it is some data that I found in the literature, and it's not unrealistic, but perhaps it is a little high. Yes, and what I have found is that under Danish conditions, it should be realistic with up to 25 tons of fresh biomass per hectare, corresponding to approximately 10 to 12 tons of dry matter. And as I mentioned before, sources disagree on the yield potential. So some sources say 10 to 12 ton per hectare dry matter, and others says perhaps it's more realistic with 7 to 10 ton per hectare. But nevertheless, a realistic price for retted hemp should be 130 to 250 euros per ton dry matter, which equals 1,300 to 3,000 euros per hectare if the yield is 10 to 12 ton per hectare. And at best, this gives a harvest value that is fully comparable to traditional cereal crops. But as you can see from the numbers, it's a very wide price range. And that shows that good economic performance depends strongly on maintaining a good hemp quality. Otherwise, it will not be economically viable. And this is, of course, even more true if the yields are lower. Also, as I mentioned before, we have considered if export of unprocessed hemp would be a possibility, and we actually also have had some contact with possible possible buyers, but the problem is that the transportation costs are quite high. So of course this is a problem with regards to export potential. Another problem in Denmark is that we expect harvesting to also be quite costly because we don't really have suitable local machinery. So again, it's difficult because we don't have a local capacity, but it's also difficult to create the local capacity without having quite a big area of hemp cultivated. So that's why we are trying to see if we can start up at least a production at the farmers. I have also been looking a bit into the carbon balance in the field, which also relates to the climate effect of growing hemp. And I have found some different scenarios here where we can compare the growing of hemp with the cultivation of cereals. And if we start with this scenario A, which is hemp grown for fibers, a typical crop yield is around 12 ton dry matter per hectare, of which about 9 tons is harvested and 3 ton remains in the fields, roots, stubbles, leaves, and so on. And this leftover biomass can lead to a soil carbon change of approximately 0 to 0.3 tons of carbon per hectare per year, meaning that the cultivation of hemp is or should be carbon neutral or slightly carbon positive under normal Danish conditions. But that that's only true if you are actually leaving some residues in the field. If you are cleaning the area totally, then this will, of course, not be the case. And also, there's the yield that could be a little optimistic, perhaps, but this is what I have found. Nevertheless, that it should actually be carbon neutral in the field or carbon positive. If we look at comparison that is relevant, that could be cereals with straw removed and no cover crops. Then hemp is actually better because if you have the scenario B, most of the carbon is exported as grain and straw, leaving only 1 to 2 tons of dry matter per hectare of roots and stubble. And long-term studies has indicated that we, in that case, will have a soil carbon loss of between 0.1 and 0.3 tons of carbon per hectare per year, which gives cereals a slightly negative carbon balance. But another also realistic scenario could be cereals with straw left in the fields, perhaps combined with the cover crops. And then we will see that the calculations show that it's more or less the same as the growing of hemp, meaning also carbon neutral to slightly positive. But nevertheless, hemp is actually an okay crop if you look at the carbon balance in the field, which is also quite important, not least in Denmark, where we actually have, or at least we are moving into a taxation of climate gases in farming.